The river was where you went when someone wanted you dead. And as Seren sank beneath the frozen water, her lungs burning, her limbs going numb, she understood that her sister had always wanted exactly that. Lysara's face was the last thing she'd seen above the surface. Beautiful, composed, utterly without remorse. The hands that had shoved her over the cliff edge had been steady. The words that had followed her down were even steadier. You should have stayed hidden, little sister. Now father will finally have what he wants, and I'll have what's mine. The cold swallowed everything after that. Serene's vision darkened. Her body stopped fighting. The moon mark on her shoulder blade burned like a brand even as the rest of her froze. That cursed silver crescent that had made her an outcast since birth, the mark of a seer, the bloodline that brought death to any alpha foolish enough to claim one. She was supposed to die hidden, unmarried, unmated, unremembered. Instead, she died in a river, thrown away like garbage by the sister she'd once loved. Or she should have died. But then hands plunged through the water, massive, impossibly warm, and dragged her toward air she no longer wanted. When Seren's eyes flickered open on the frozen riverbank, coughing water and barely alive, she found herself staring up at a face carved from winter itself. Pale hair, gray eyes, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. The Alpha King of Valdris looked down at her broken body and said 5 words that changed everything. This one. She's mine now. His court would call him mad. His advisors would call it political suicide. Her own family would call it impossible. But Caleb made his terms clear within the hour. He would marry her, protect her, give her a title and a crown. He would never ask about the mark she kept hidden beneath her clothes. But there was one condition. He would never love her. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be. The morning had begun with betrayal dressed as sisterhood. Come walk with me, Lysara had said, her smile soft, her voice gentle. It's been so long since we've talked. Just the two of us. Seren should have known better. In 19 years of living in House Varen, her elder sister had never once sought her company willingly. Lysara was the legitimate daughter, the beautiful one, the heir their father actually acknowledged. Seren was the shadow that moved through servant corridors and ate meals alone in her room. But Hope was a stubborn creature. It survived even in places where it had no right to exist. So Seren had followed her sister through the snow-covered grounds, past the manor's iron gates, and toward the ancient forests that bordered their father's lands. Lysara had talked about nothing important: the weather, the upcoming winter ball, the visiting nobles from the eastern territories. She'd talked until they reached the river gorge. Seren remembered stopping at the edge, looking down at the churning black water 40 feet below. Ice clung to the rocks. The current was vicious, fed by mountain snowmelt. Beautiful, isn't it? Lysara had said. Then she'd pushed. There'd been no warning, no dramatic confrontation. Just 2 hands planted firmly between Seren's shoulder blades, and then she was falling. The water hit like a wall of knives. The cold wasn't cold. It was annihilation. Every nerve in Seren's body screamed at once, and then they stopped screaming entirely because there was nothing left to feel. She'd tried to swim. The current had laughed at her efforts. She'd tried to breathe. The water had other ideas. And through it all, one thought had burned brighter than the others. She did this because of him. Because of Lord Brennan. Lysara's betrothed. The match their father had arranged 3 months ago. The man who'd made the mistake of being kind to Seren once. Just once. And that single moment of warmth had been enough to ignite her sister's jealousy into something murderous. Seren hadn't wanted him. She hadn't wanted anyone. She knew what she was. The moon mark on her shoulder blade guaranteed she would never marry, never mate, never know the touch of an alpha without cursing him to death. But Lysara hadn't believed her. Lysara saw threats everywhere, especially in the half-sister she'd never wanted to exist in the first place. I'm going to die, Seren thought as the darkness pulled her under. I'm going to die, and no one will ever know what really happened. Her body hit something hard beneath the water. A rock, a submerged log. She couldn't tell. And the impact knocked the last air from her lungs. She felt the moon mark burning against her skin, hotter than it had ever burned before. And then she felt nothing at all. Warmth was the first thing that registered. Impossible warmth, wrapping around her ribcage like iron bands. Pressure, movement, the sensation of being lifted, carried, cradled against something solid and furnace hot. I'm dead, Seren thought. This must be what death feels like. But death didn't come with the scratch of wool against her cheek. Death didn't smell like pine and wood smoke and something deeper, muskier, and distinctly male. Death didn't have a heartbeat thundering against her ear. Seren's eyes flew open. She was in someone's arms. Someone massive. The forest spun above her, snow-laden branches, gray sky, the distant roar of the river she'd nearly died in. Her chest spasmed, and she convulsed forward, vomiting water onto ground that was suddenly beneath her. Hands held her hair back, the same impossibly warm hands that had pulled her from the water. Breathe, a voice commanded. Male, deep, cold as the ice she'd just escaped, despite the heat of his touch. Slowly. You've swallowed half the river. Seren coughed until her throat felt raw, until her ribs screamed in protest, until there was nothing left to expel. Only then did she look up. And her breath stopped for an entirely different reason. The man crouching before her wasn't a man at all. He was something else entirely. Something ancient and predatory wrapped in human skin. Pale blonde hair fell past his shoulders, darkened with river water. His face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, cheekbones that could cut, a jaw carved from granite. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. Gray. Not the soft gray of morning clouds, but the gray of frozen iron, of something vast and merciless and utterly devoid of warmth. Alpha eyes. Seren's wolf, the weak, suppressed creature her father's bindings had nearly strangled out of existence, whimpered in recognition and in terror, because she knew this face. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew this face. Kalum, the Alpha King of Valdris, the youngest ruler to ever unite the wolf packs. The man they called the Winter King because wherever he went, warmth seemed to die. You're, she started, her voice a ruined rasp. Alive, he finished. Thanks to me. His gaze swept over her, clinical, assessing, utterly impersonal. Can you stand? Seren tried. Her legs buckled immediately. He caught her before she hit the ground, one arm banding around her waist, and she gasped at the contact. His body heat was unnatural, searing through her wet clothes. That would be a no, he observed. Behind him, Seren became aware of other figures. Guards in black leather armor, bearing the silver wolf sigil of Valdris. Horses stamping impatiently in the snow. A hunting party, she realized. He'd been hunting when he found her. One of the guards stepped forward, his expression troubled. Your Majesty, we should leave her at the nearest village. We can send someone to— No. The single word silenced everything. Even the wind seemed to pause. Calum's eyes hadn't left Seren's face. Up close, she could see the shadows beneath them, the pallor of his skin despite the heat he radiated. Something was wrong with him. Something fundamental. Your Majesty, the guard tried again. She's clearly from minor nobility. House Varin, if I recognize the crest on her cloak. Her family threw her into that river. Calum's voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who'd witnessed it himself. I watched from the ridge. The words slammed into Seren like a second drowning. He'd seen everything, and he'd still pulled her out. Why? The Alpha King answered her unspoken question by straightening to his full height, easily a head taller than any of his guards, and looking at his men with those frozen storm eyes. She has nowhere to go, no one to claim her. A pause. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. So I will. The guards' faces went pale. The horses shifted nervously. Even the wind seemed to recoil. Your Majesty, the first guard breathed, you cannot simply claim a woman you found in a river. I am the Alpha King. Caleb lifted Seren into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and she was too shocked to protest. I can do whatever I wish. He turned toward the horses, carrying her through the snow like she was something precious rather than something discarded. This one, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She's mine now. And Seren, half drowned and barely conscious, felt the moon mark on her shoulder blade burn with a warning she was too exhausted to understand. What have you done? She wanted to scream at him. What have you done to us both? But darkness claimed her before she could speak. Seren woke in pieces. First, the warmth. She was surrounded by it. Furs beneath her, blankets above her, a fire crackling somewhere nearby. The cold that had sunk into her bones by the river was gone, replaced by a drowsy, heavy heat. Second, the softness. The bed beneath her was the most luxurious thing she'd ever felt. Not the thin mattress and threadbare sheets of her room at House Varenne, but genuine feather-stuffed comfort. The kind of bed she'd only seen from doorways while the servants cleaned Lysara's chambers. Third, the silence. No whispered insults from passing guards, no muffled laughter from her sister's friends. No footsteps deliberately heavy outside her door to remind her she wasn't welcome. Just peace. Just stillness. Serene's eyes snapped open and peace shattered. The room was enormous. Stone walls softened by tapestries depicting silver wolves running through snow. Arched windows letting in gray afternoon light. Furniture carved from dark wood, elegant and old and clearly worth more than everything her father owned combined. This was not her room. This was not her home. This was not anywhere she had ever been. Memory flooded back in fragments. The river, the cold, the drowning. And then, Caleb. Seren sat up so fast the room spun. She clutched the blankets to her chest, suddenly aware that her ruined dress had been replaced with a clean nightgown. Someone had changed her clothes. Someone had seen. Her hand flew to her shoulder blade, pressing against the fabric. The moon mark pulsed beneath her palm, hot and insistent. Still hidden. Still covered. For now, her mind whispered. But if anyone sees it? A knock at the door made her pulse stutter. The king requests your presence. A woman's voice called. Formal. Neutral. I've brought clothes. May I enter? Seren's voice wouldn't come. She managed a weak sound that apparently counted as permission, because the door swung open to reveal an older woman in servant's attire. Gray hair pulled back severely. Sharp eyes that assessed Seren with professional efficiency. Good, the woman said. You're awake. His Majesty was beginning to wonder if you'd sleep through the entire week. She crossed to the bed and laid out garments on a nearby chair, a simple but well-made dress in deep blue, undergarments, a pair of soft boots. I am Helga. I'll be attending to you during your stay. During your stay. The words implied temporariness. That was good. That meant she wasn't trapped here. Except she had nowhere else to go. Where? Seren's voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. Where am I? Valdris Keep, the Alpha King's seat. Helga began laying out the clothes with crisp movements. You've been unconscious for 2 days. The healers say you nearly died. 2 days. Seren's mind reeled. 2 days of being here, in the Winter King's castle, with her mark hidden only by whatever clothes they'd put her in. I need to leave, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Please, if you could just help me get to the nearest village, I can— Leave? Helga's eyebrows rose. His Majesty has claimed you. Where exactly would you go? The words landed like stones in still water. Claimed. She remembered him saying that by the river. She'd thought it was delirium, her dying brain inventing impossible things. But it had been real. He can't— Seren started. He can. Helga's voice softened just slightly. He's the Alpha King, girl. He can do whatever he pleases. She gestured to the clothes. Now get dressed. He doesn't like to be kept waiting. The corridors of Valdris Keep seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, narrow windows that let in more cold than light, stone floors that echoed with every footstep. Guards stationed at every intersection, their faces impassive, their eyes tracking Seren's movements as Helga led her deeper into the castle. She felt like a prisoner being escorted to her execution. Maybe I am, she thought grimly. Maybe he saw my mark. Maybe this is all a pretense before he kills me. The stories about seers were clear. They were cursed creatures, their bloodline tainted by magic that didn't belong in wolfkind. Any alpha who claimed a seer would die within the year, withered from the inside, consumed by visions they couldn't control. Her father had told her this every day of her life. It was why she'd been hidden, why she'd never been presented at court, why she'd been forbidden from ever letting an alpha see what she truly was. And now, the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories had pulled her from a river and claimed her as his own. The cruelty of it almost made her laugh. She'd survived Lysera's murder attempt only to face a different kind of death. Slower, perhaps, but just as inevitable. Helga stopped before a set of massive oak doors, banded with iron and carved with wolf motifs. "The king's study," she said. "Go in, he's expecting you." Seren's hands shook as she reached for the handle. "You've faced worse," she told herself. Lysara's cruelty, father's hatred, 19 years of being told you shouldn't exist. What's one more monster? She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was warmer than the corridors, a fire blazing in a massive hearth that dominated one wall. Bookshelves stretched toward the ceiling, crammed with leather-bound volumes. Maps covered a central table, weighted down by carved wolf figurines, and standing by the window, backlit by gray winter light, was Calum. He turned as she entered, and Seren's breath caught for the second time since meeting him. He was dressed simply, black trousers, a white shirt unlaced at the throat, but simplicity couldn't diminish what he was. Power radiated from him like heat from the fire. His pale hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp architecture of his features. He was beautiful, terribly, coldly beautiful, and absolutely lethal. "You're awake," he observed. His voice was the same as she remembered, deep and distant, winter-given sound. Seren curtsied, her legs still unsteady. "Your Majesty." "Sit." He gestured to a chair near the fire. "Before you collapse again." She sat. Not because he'd commanded it, but because her knees genuinely felt like they might buckle. The warmth of the fire seeped into her aching muscles, and she had to fight not to sigh in relief. Calum remained standing. His gray eyes passed over her, assessing, cataloging, and she felt exposed despite being fully clothed. "You've been unconscious for 2 days," he said. "The river nearly killed you. Another few minutes in that water, and it would have." "Thank you," Seren managed, "for saving me." "I didn't save you out of kindness." The words were flat, factual. "I saved you because I have use for you." Something cold settled in Seren's stomach. "Use?" Calum moved away from the window, circling the room like a predator assessing prey. "I need a wife. Someone to bear heirs. Someone to stand beside me at official functions and satisfy the council's demands that I secure the succession." "Your Majesty?" Surely there are noble women. Noble women come with families, he interrupted, with political connections, with expectations. He stopped directly in front of her chair, looking down at her with those glacier gray eyes. You come with nothing. The words should have been an insult. Instead, they felt like a strange kind of freedom. I watched your sister push you into that river, Caleb continued. I saw the look on her face. There was no hesitation, no remorse. A pause. Your family wants you dead. They will not come looking for you. They will not make demands. They will not interfere. Emotion closed around Seren's windpipe. You want me because I'm disposable. I want you because you're uncomplicated. He crouched before her chair, bringing their faces level, and she resisted the urge to flinch back. Up close, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. You will be my wife, my queen. You will give me children and appear at my side when necessary. In return, you will have safety, comfort, and protection. And if I refuse, then I will have my guards escort you to the nearest village. His expression didn't change. Where your family will eventually find you, where your sister will finish what she started. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled against the windows. Seren understood she wasn't being given a choice. She was being given a mercy disguised as one. You should know, she said carefully, that I'm not. There are things about me that I don't need to know. Caleb straightened, cutting her off with the same casual authority he'd shown by the river. Whatever secrets you're hiding, keep them. I have no interest in your past, your family, or your reasons for covering yourself in shame. Covering myself in? Seren stopped. She'd been wearing long sleeves since she woke. The nightgown covered her to the wrists and throat. He'd noticed. Of course he'd noticed. Everyone hides something, Caleb said. You'll find I'm quite good at not looking. She stared at him, searching for the trap, the cruelty, the ulterior motive. But his scent revealed nothing. His expression was locked down tight, perfectly controlled. There's one final condition, he said, moving toward his desk. He picked up a document, a contract, she realized, and held it out to her. I will never love you. The words hung in the air between them, stark and cold. I cannot afford sentiment, Caleb continued. I will not pretend affection I don't feel. You will be my wife in name and duty, nothing more. Is that understood? Seren took the contract with numb fingers. He's offering me everything I never dared want, she thought. Safety, protection, a life where no one will throw me into rivers or tell me I shouldn't exist. And all I have to do is accept that I'll never be loved. That was easy. She'd never expected love. She'd never even expected to survive this long. I understand, she said quietly. A crack appeared in his composure. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. You're not going to argue? Demand courtship? Weep about romance? Your Majesty. Seren met his gaze steadily. I come from a family that tried to murder me. A loveless marriage to a king who will leave me alone sounds like paradise. For a long moment, Caleb simply stared at her. Then, so faintly she almost missed it, the corner of his mouth twitched. Sign the contract, he said. The wedding will be in 3 days. Seren signed. As she handed back the document, Caleb spoke again. One more thing. Your family believes you're dead. I've ensured no word of your survival has reached them. His eyes held hers with cold intensity. Let them feel safe in their cruelty. When the time comes, their reckoning will be all the more complete. Seren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter outside. He wasn't just protecting her. He was planning something. Something that would make her father and sister pay for what they'd done. And instead of fear, she felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Thank you, Your Majesty, she whispered. The moon mark burned against her shoulder blade, a warning she still couldn't understand. But for the first time in 19 years, Seren felt something that might have been hope. The council chamber was designed for intimidation. A long table of polished black wood dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by men who looked like they'd been carved from the same stone as the castle walls. Ancient tapestries depicted Valdris's bloody history: battles won, enemies conquered, wolves running red-mouthed through snow. Narrow windows let in knife slits of gray light, and at the head of the table sat Calum, still as a statue, watching Seren enter with those unreadable winter eyes. She'd been summoned an hour after signing the contract. The council must approve the marriage, Helga had explained, dressing her in a gown of dark green velvet that covered her from throat to wrist. It's tradition. Tradition. As if tradition meant anything when the Alpha King had already decided. But Seren had learned long ago that powerful men enjoyed their rituals. So she walked into the council chamber with her head high, her hands steady at her sides, and her moon mark hidden beneath layers of fabric and prayer. Lady Seren of House Varen, the steward announced, future bride of His Majesty, Alpha King Calum of Valdris. Whispers erupted immediately. House Varen, that's barely minor nobility. I've never seen her at any court function. Look at how thin she is. Half-starved if you ask me. The king could have had princesses. Why this? Seren kept walking. She'd survived 19 years of whispers. These were nothing new. A chair had been placed near Calum's end of the table, not beside him, but close enough to suggest proximity. She moved toward it, but before she could sit, a voice cut through the murmurs. Stop. The speaker was an older man, broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades giving orders. Lord Commander Valco, Seren guessed, based on Helga's hasty briefing. Head of the council and second only to the king in authority. Valco rose from his chair, his cold gaze fixed on Seren. Before this goes any further, I must object. The whispers died. Even the fire seemed to quiet. Calum's expression didn't change. Object to what? To this arrangement. Valco gestured at Seren dismissively. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously intend to make this girl your queen. She has no dowry, no political connections, no status worth mentioning. His lip curled. She was pulled half dead from a river by your hunting party. She's charity, not a consort. Seren felt the words like blows, but she kept her face still. You've heard worse? She reminded herself. Father called you an abomination. Lysara called you a waste of breath. This is nothing. Are you finished? Calum asked. Valco's jaw tightened. Your Majesty, I've served 3 kings. I have the right to counsel. You have the right to advise. Calum's voice remained level, but something cold crept into it. Not to object. There's a difference. Then let me advise. Valco took a step toward Seren, studying her like something he'd found on the bottom of his boot. Girl, what are you hiding? Blood rushed in Seren's ears. The gown you're wearing covers every inch of skin except your face and hands. Valco circled her slowly, and she had to force herself not to turn, not to protect her back where the mark lay hidden. You've been here 2 days, and no one has seen you without full coverage. Even the healers reported you refused to remove your underthings for examination. He knows, Seren thought, panic rising. He suspects something. Perhaps she's modest, one of the other counselors suggested. Perhaps she's hiding something. Valco stopped directly in front of her. Scars? Deformities? A mating mark from another alpha? His eyes narrowed. Tell me, girl, what's beneath all that fabric? Seren opened her mouth, but no words came. The mark was burning against her shoulder blade, hot enough that she wondered if the heat would show through the velvet. Say something, she screamed at herself. Anything. But before she could speak, Calum moved. He didn't rise dramatically or raise his voice. He simply leaned forward in his chair, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Lord Commander," he said quietly, "are you interrogating my future wife?" Valco went pale. "Your Majesty, you merely overstepped." Calem's gray eyes had gone flat, dead, like frozen ponds covering something dangerous beneath. "This woman's body is not your concern. Her secrets are not your business, and her worthiness to be queen is not your decision. The council has always had a voice in royal marriages. The council has a voice when I choose to hear it." Calem rose, and even Valco took a step back. "I have chosen this woman. I have claimed her. When she becomes my wife, any insult to her will be an insult to me." He looked around the table, meeting each counselor's eyes in turn. "Am I understood?" Silence. Absolute terrified silence. "Am I understood?" Calem repeated, softer this time, which somehow made it worse. "Yes, Your Majesty," the counselors murmured, one after another. Falco was the last to speak. His face had gone from pale to flushed, humiliation and fury warring in his expression. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." Calem turned to Seren. "Please, sit." She sat. For the next hour, the council discussed wedding arrangements, diplomatic implications, and public announcements. Seren barely heard any of it. Her pulse was still racing from the moment Valco had circled her, from the certain knowledge that her secret had nearly been exposed. But beneath the fear was something else. Something warm and unfamiliar. "He defended me," she thought, watching Calem from the corner of her eye. His face was expressionless, his attention fixed on some minor detail about guest lists. He didn't ask why I was hiding. He just protected me. It meant nothing, she told herself. He'd said he wanted an uncomplicated wife. Letting Valco expose her secrets would be very complicated. This was pragmatism, politics, strategy. But when the meeting finally ended and the counselors filed out, shooting her curious and hostile glances in equal measure, Calem caught her arm. His touch was warm, so warm, despite the coldness that seemed to radiate from everything else about him. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Most women would have crumbled." "I'm not most women." The words came out before she could stop them. His mask slipped for just a moment. "Interest? Amusement?" "No," he said slowly. "I'm beginning to see that." He released her arm and stepped back, and the warmth faded immediately, replaced by his usual frigid composure. "The wedding is in 3 days," he said. "After that, you'll be queen. You'll have authority, protection, and power." A pause. "Try not to let Valco intimidate you. He's a relic who mistakes cruelty for strength." "And what do you mistake it for?" Seren asked. The question surprised them both. She saw Calem's eyes widen fractionally before the mask slammed back down. "Nothing," he said. "I don't mistake anything. I see exactly what things are." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the council chamber with nothing but shadows and the distant howl of wind against stone. But as Seren watched him go, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Alpha King of Valdris was lying, not to her, to himself. That night, Seren dreamed of drowning. The river was colder than before, darker, and this time no hands reached down to save her. She sank and sank and sank, the moon mark on her shoulder blade burning like a star, and somewhere far above she heard Lysara laughing. She woke gasping, tangled in sheets, her nightgown soaked with sweat. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then the stone walls registered, the dying fire in the hearth, the faint smell of pine and snow. Valdris. She was in Valdris. She was safe. For now, her mind whispered, until they discover what you are. Seren pressed a hand to her shoulder blade. The mark was warm beneath her palm. Not burning, but present. Aware. as if it knew something she didn't. She rose from the bed, crossing to the window. Outside, snow fell in thick curtains, blanketing the castle grounds in white. The moon was full tonight, bright enough to cast shadows even through the storm. Movement caught her eye. Far below in the courtyard, a figure walked alone through the snow. Tall, broad-shouldered, pale hair catching moonlight. Calum. He was barefoot, wearing nothing but thin trousers despite the freezing temperature. And he was smoking. No, not smoking. Steam rose from his skin as snowflakes landed and immediately melted. His body heat was so intense, it created a small sphere of warmth around him, visible as a shimmer in the frozen air. That's not normal, Seren thought. Alphas run hot, but not like that. She watched him pace the courtyard like a caged animal, back and forth, back and forth. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Once he stopped and tilted his face toward the sky, and even from this distance she could see the tension in his body, the pain. Because that was what it looked like. Not restlessness or insomnia, but pain. As if something inside him was burning and he couldn't make it stop. Everyone hides something, he'd told her. You'll find I'm quite good at not looking. But Seren was looking now, and what she saw was a man in torment, standing alone in a snowstorm at midnight because the alternative was somehow worse. She pressed her palm against the cold glass of the window. What are you hiding, Calum of Valdris? She wondered. What could possibly hurt the Alpha King? The moon mark burned against her shoulder blade, a warning she didn't understand. And somewhere in the castle, a wolf howled. The Cathedral of Valdris had stood for 600 years. Its spires pierced the winter sky like frozen fangs. Its walls were carved from stone so old it had turned black with age. Inside, candles flickered in iron chandeliers, casting wavering light across pews packed with nobility who had traveled from every corner of the northern territories to witness the impossible. The Alpha King was marrying a nobody. Seren stood at the entrance, her hands trembling inside white silk gloves. The wedding gown Helga had dressed her in was beautiful. Silver fabric that caught the candlelight, a fitted bodice, a train that whispered against stone floors. But what mattered most was what it covered. High collar, long sleeves, a back that rose to the nape of her neck. The moon mark remained hidden. For now. Ready? Helga asked quietly. No, Seren thought. I will never be ready for this. But she nodded anyway, and the cathedral doors swung open. The walk down the aisle felt endless. Every face turned toward her. Every eye assessed, judged, found her wanting. She heard the whispers slithering through the pews like serpents. She's pretty enough, I suppose. Pretty doesn't make a queen. I heard she was half drowned when he found her. Barely alive. Why would he choose this over Princess Alara of the Eastern Reaches? There must be something wrong with her. Something he's not telling us. Seren kept her gaze fixed forward, on the altar where Calum waited. He wore black, because of course he did. The formal military jacket emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the medals and insignia marking him as what he was, the most powerful alpha in 1,000 miles. His face revealed nothing. His scent, even from this distance, was locked down tight. He's good at hiding, she thought. Maybe even better than me. She reached the altar. The priest, an elderly man with kind eyes and trembling hands, began the ceremony in a voice that echoed off ancient stone. We gather today to witness the sacred union of alpha and mate, of king and queen, of two souls bound by the old laws. Seren barely heard the words. She was too aware of Calum standing beside her, radiating that impossible heat. Too aware of the moon mark burning against her shoulder blade like a warning. This is a mistake, she thought. The moment he claims me, the curse begins. He'll wither within a year, die before our first anniversary. But what choice did she have? Return to her father's house and wait for Lysara to finish the job? Wander the wilderness until cold or hunger claimed her? At least this way, her death would mean something. She'd be queen, however briefly. She'd have mattered. The rings, the priest announced. Caleb turned to her, and their eyes met for the first time since she'd entered the cathedral. His gaze was unreadable, but something stirred in its depths. Not warmth, not affection, but recognition. He sees me, Siren realized. Not what I'm hiding, just me. He took her hand. His fingers were warm, too warm, that unnatural heat bleeding through her gloves, as he slid a ring of twisted silver onto her finger. With this ring, he said, his voice carrying through the cathedral, I bind myself to you. My strength is your shield. My kingdom is your home. My life is your protection. The words were traditional, but something in the way he said them felt different, heavier, as if he actually meant them. Her chest constricted as she slid a matching ring onto his finger. With this ring, I bind myself to you. My loyalty is your certainty. My trust is your foundation. My life is your companion. The priest smiled. And now, the unveiling. Siren's blood turned to ice. The unveiling. She'd forgotten. In traditional Valdris ceremonies, the groom lifted the bride's veil to look upon her face for the first time as husband and wife. But she wasn't wearing a veil over her face. She was wearing a high collar that covered everything, including the mark that would condemn them both. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The nobility craned their necks, eager to finally see what the mysterious queen looked like beneath her careful coverings. Caleb looked at her. She looked back, and she knew her fear was visible. The trembling of her hands, the way her breath had gone shallow, the silent plea in her eyes. Please, she thought. Please don't. The silence stretched. The priest cleared his throat nervously, and then Caleb did something no one expected. He took her gloved hand and lifted it to his lips. Some traditions, he said, loudly enough for the front pews to hear, are better left in the past. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, gentle, formal, almost reverent, and then lowered her hand, still holding it in his own. The crowd erupted in confused whispers. The priest stammered through the rest of the ceremony, clearly thrown by the deviation, but Siren stood frozen, staring at this strange, cold, impossibly kind man who had just defied 6 centuries of tradition to protect a secret he didn't even understand. Why? She whispered, so softly only he could hear. Caleb's eyes met hers, gray as thunderclouds before snow. Because you asked me not to look. The priest's voice rang out over the chaos. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife, alpha and queen, bound until death. Until death, Siren thought, and the moon mark burned like a promise. His death, because of me. The wedding feast was a blur of faces and noise. Nobility approached to offer congratulations they didn't mean. Servants brought food Siren couldn't eat. Musicians played songs she didn't hear. Through it all, Caleb sat beside her on the raised dais, close enough to touch but miles away in every way that mattered. They didn't speak. They barely looked at each other. The vast hall full of people somehow made them more alone than if they'd been the only 2 souls in existence. When the feast finally ended, when the last noble had staggered off to their guest chambers, Helga appeared at Siren's elbow. It's time, she said quietly. The marriage must be consummated. Siren's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming. It was part of the contract. Heirs, succession, duty. But knowing and facing were different beasts entirely. Helga led her through candlelit corridors to a set of chambers she hadn't seen before, the king's chambers. The door was heavy oak, carved with wolf motifs, and when Helga opened it, warmth spilled out like breath. He's waiting, Helga said. Then she was gone, and Seren was alone. She stepped inside. The room was larger than her entire quarters at House Varen. A fire roared in a massive hearth. Furs covered a bed the size of a small meadow. And standing by the window, his back to her, was Calum. He'd removed his formal jacket. The white shirt beneath was unlaced at the throat, hanging loose, and even from behind she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Close the door," he said without turning. Seren closed it. The click of the latch seemed very loud. Calum finally turned, and she saw what the formal jacket had hidden. His shirt was damp with sweat despite the chill outside. His skin was flushed, almost feverish, and his eyes, those winter gray eyes, held something she hadn't seen before. Pain. "Your Majesty," she started, "if this is too soon." "It's not that." He moved toward her, and she had to force herself not to step back. "I need you to understand something before we proceed." "Understand what?" He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, not warmth, but heat, like standing too close to a forge. "I will wear a blindfold," he said, "so I don't accidentally see what you're hiding. But you should know." He paused, his jaw tightening with what looked like shame. "My body runs hotter than it should. It may be uncomfortable for you. I apologize in advance." Seren stared at him. He was apologizing? For his own physical condition? "I can endure some heat," she said quietly. "I've endured worse." His eyes betrayed him, just for an instant. "Yes," he said. "I imagine you have." He produced a strip of black silk from his pocket, the same color as his formal jacket, as the shadows under his eyes, as everything about him that felt like darkness. "Turn around," Seren said before she could stop herself. Calum's eyebrows rose. "Why?" "Because I'll tie it, and then you won't be able to see me do it." For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he turned his back. Serene's hands trembled as she stepped closer. Up close, she could see the muscles of his shoulders through the thin shirt. She could smell him, pine and wood smoke and something deeper, richer, unmistakably male. She reached up to tie the blindfold, her fingers brushing against his hair, his temples, and his cheekbones. His skin was burning, not warm, burning. "You're feverish," she said, concerned. "Always," he replied. "Don't worry about it." But she did worry, because this wasn't normal, this was wrong. She secured the blindfold and stepped back. "It's done." Calum turned to face her, sightless now. And somehow that made him less terrifying and more human. Vulnerable, even. "The candles," he said. "Extinguish them. Complete darkness. I want you to feel safe." Seren moved through the room, blowing out candles one by one until only the fire remained. Then she used the poker to bank the flames, reducing them to glowing embers. Darkness fell like a curtain, and in that darkness, for the first time, Seren felt something other than fear. She couldn't see him, but she could feel him, the heat of his body as he moved closer, the whisper of his breath, the subtle shift in the air as he raised one hand, giving her time to pull away. "Tell me if you want to stop," Calum said. His voice was rougher now, strained. "At any point. For any reason. Tell me, and I will." "I understand." His hand found her shoulder. The touch was light, questioning. Even through the fabric of her gown she could feel the unnatural heat of his palm. "You're trembling," he observed. "I'm nervous." "Have you done this before?" "No." The admission came out smaller than she intended. Calum's hand stilled. "Then we go slowly." Seren didn't know what she'd expected. Roughness, perhaps. Coldness to match his demeanor. The perfunctory claiming of a man fulfilling a contract. What she got was patience. His fingers found the clasps at the back of her gown. Carefully, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to stop him. When the fabric loosened, he didn't immediately push it off. He simply held it there, waiting. "You can still say no," he murmured. "I'm not saying no." The gown whispered down her body, pooling at her feet. Seren stood in her underthings, grateful for the darkness that hid her burning cheeks. Calem's hands moved to her shoulders, tracing the line of her collarbones. His touch was feather-light, exploratory. When his fingers reached the edge of her chemise, high-necked, covering everything, he paused. "This too? Leave it." The words came out too fast, too desperate. "Please, I need to stay covered." She expected questions, arguments, the inevitable demand to see what she was hiding. Instead, Calem simply said, "All right." His hands moved lower, finding her waist, her hips, and the bare skin of her arms. Every touch sent sparks racing through her, not from the heat, though that was overwhelming, but from something else. Something that felt dangerously close to desire. "May I kiss you?" he asked. Serene's breath caught. "Yes." He found her face in the darkness, cupping her jaw with those burning hands, tilting her chin up. Then his mouth descended on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected cold. His personality was ice, his eyes were winter, and everything about him radiated frost. But his lips were warm, soft, moving against hers with a tenderness that shattered every assumption she'd made about him. She made a small sound, surprise, pleasure, something between, and felt him smile against her mouth. "Good?" he murmured. "Good," she breathed. The kiss deepened. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling it loose from its careful arrangement. Serene's own hands found his chest, pressing against the thin fabric of his shirt, feeling the heat of him sear through to her palms. Too hot. He was too hot. This wasn't a fever. This was something else. But before she could voice her concern, he lifted her. The sensation of being carried was foreign, intimate. His arms were strong beneath her, and she found herself clinging to his shoulders as he navigated the darkness toward what she assumed was the bed. When he laid her down, she expected him to join her immediately. Instead, he stepped back. "Calem?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "I'm here." His voice came from somewhere to her right. Rustling fabric. He was removing his shirt. "I just need a moment." She heard his breathing change. Faster, more ragged. A sound escaped him. Pain? Pleasure? She couldn't tell. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing." The word came out strained. "It's just being close to you, touching you. It makes the heat worse." "Worse?" He didn't answer. Instead, she felt the bed dip as he joined her, his body radiating warmth like a furnace. When his hands found her again, tracing the line of her thigh, she gasped at the temperature. "Too hot?" he asked. "No." It should have been. It should have been unbearable. But somehow, the heat felt right against her skin. Grounding. Real. They came together slowly as he'd promised. He was patient when she needed patience, gentle when she needed gentleness. And when the pain came, brief, sharp, expected, he stilled completely, pressing kisses to her forehead until it passed. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe for me." She breathed, and then something shifted between them. The awkwardness faded. Their bodies found a rhythm, and Seren discovered sensations she hadn't known existed. Heat and pressure, and something building, climbing, and reaching toward a peak she couldn't name. When release finally crashed through her, she cried out. Calem followed moments later, a groan tearing from his throat as his body shuddered against hers. For a long moment they simply lay tangled together, breathing hard, hearts racing. Then Calem did something unexpected. He stayed. His arm came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His face buried itself in her hair, and despite the inferno of his skin, she felt safe. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'll be here." Seren closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. Because in the darkness, pressed against his burning skin, she'd noticed something she couldn't explain. Scars. Across his back, his shoulders, his ribcage. A network of raised tissue, old wounds that had healed badly. She'd felt them beneath her palms, and in her surprise, she'd traced them with her fingers. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. As if someone had taken a blade to him over and over and over again. And when she'd touched them, she'd felt him flinch. "What happened to you?" she wanted to ask. What could possibly hurt the Alpha King so badly that the scars still linger? But his breathing had already evened into sleep, and she didn't have the heart to wake him. So she lay there, cocooned in his impossible heat, and wondered what secrets the Winter King was carrying beneath his frozen exterior. When she woke, he was gone. The bed beside her was cold, or at least as cold as any space could be after containing a furnace like Kaloum. Pale morning light filtered through the curtains. The fire in the hearth had died to ash. Seren sat up slowly, wincing at the unfamiliar aches in her body. Evidence of the night before. Evidence that she was truly married now, in every sense of the word. She touched her chemise, still in place. He'd honored her request to stay covered, even in passion, even in the dark. Why? She wondered. Why does he keep being kind when he claims he can't love? A knock at the door preceded Helga's entrance. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral as she took in the rumpled bed, Seren's disheveled state. "Good morning, Your Majesty," she said. "I trust you slept well?" "Your Majesty." The title felt wrong, heavy, like a crown she hadn't earned. "Where is the king?" Seren asked. "Council chambers. He rises at dawn, without exception." Helga moved to open the curtains fully. "He asked me to tell you that your rooms have been prepared in the Queen's wing. You may move your belongings whenever you're ready." "Separate rooms?" "Of course." Helga's eyebrows rose slightly. "Did you expect otherwise?" His Majesty made the arrangement clear. "You will have your own chambers, your own staff, and your own schedule. He will visit when—" A delicate pause. "When duty requires." When duty requires? Seren told herself the pang she felt wasn't disappointment. It was relief. This was the arrangement she'd agreed to. Cold over cruelty. Distance over danger. She didn't want him to love her. She couldn't let him love her. The moon mark would ensure his death if he did. This was for the best. So why did "for the best" feel so lonely? Weeks passed. Then months. Seren learned the rhythms of Valdris Keep, the geography of its corridors and courtyards, the faces of its servants and guards. She attended the required functions: formal dinners, diplomatic receptions, appearances at court, always dressed in high-collared gowns that hid everything important. And every few nights, without warning or announcement, Calum would appear at her chamber door. The first time it happened after their wedding night, Seren had been surprised. The second time, curious. By the 10th time, she'd begun to anticipate it. The soft knock, the door opening, his tall form silhouetted in the corridor's torchlight. He never spoke of why he came. He simply arrived, blindfolded himself, extinguished the lights, and reached for her. And Seren let him. Every time. She told herself it was duty. The contract required heirs, after all. But duty didn't explain the way her pulse quickened when she heard his knock. Duty didn't explain the heat that pooled low in her belly when his hands found her in the darkness. Duty didn't explain why she'd started looking forward to the nights he came more than any other part of her existence. But something was wrong with him. She'd noticed it that first night. The scars, the fever, the way he flinched at certain touches. But as the weeks passed, she noticed more. He was always exhausted. Dark circles lived permanently beneath his eyes. His appetite was poor. She'd watched him push food around his plate at formal dinners without actually eating. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, she caught him pressing a hand to his chest as if something pained him there. One night, she finally asked, "Are you ill?" They were lying in the aftermath, his arm draped over her waist, his breathing slowly returning to normal. The fire had burned down to embers, leaving the room in near total darkness. "What makes you ask that?" His voice was drowsy, unguarded in a way she rarely heard it. "You're always hot, but it's not a healthy heat. It's..." She searched for words. "It's like you're burning from inside, and the scars on your back." Caleb went rigid. The arm around her waist tightened briefly, then withdrew entirely. "It's a family condition," he said, his voice suddenly flat. "Nothing to concern yourself with." "But," I said, "it's nothing." He was already rising. She could hear him searching for his clothes in the darkness. "I should go. Dawn comes early." "Caleb, wait." He stopped. She heard his breathing. Too fast, too shallow. "You don't have to tell me what it is," Seren said quietly. "But please don't pretend it's nothing. I can see you're in pain. I'm not blind." The silence stretched. Then, so softly she almost missed it. "No, you're not blind. That's part of the problem." Before she could ask what he meant, the door opened and closed, and he was gone. Seren went to the one person who might have answers. Helga had been in Valdris Keep for 30 years. She'd served 3 kings: Caleb's grandfather, who never loved at all; his father, who loved carefully and sparingly; and now Caleb himself. She knew every secret these walls had ever held. "The king's condition," Seren said carefully, watching the older woman's face. "It's not normal, is it?" Helga's hands stilled over the linen she was folding. "Your Majesty, I don't know what you mean. He burns like a forge. He barely sleeps. He has scars across his entire back." Seren stepped closer. "Something is wrong with him, and no one will tell me what." For a long moment, Helga said nothing. Then she sighed. "The kings of Valdris have always carried a burden," she said quietly. "It comes from the first Alpha, the founder of the line. He made a bargain with something ancient, something powerful, to ensure his heirs would never be ruled by emotion, never be swayed by love or sentiment." Seren's stomach turned. "A curse? A blessing, depending on who you ask." Helga's eyes were sad. "The Valdris line cannot feel pain themselves. Instead, they absorb the pain of anyone they love. Physical, emotional, all of it transfers to them. The more they love, the more they suffer." The words hit Seren like a physical blow. "That's why he's always burning. The scars, the exhaustion." "His Majesty loved his mother very much," Helga said softly. "She died when he was 12, after a long illness. Every moment of her suffering lived in his body instead of hers. And when she finally passed..." The older woman's voice broke. "They found him unconscious. The pain of her death nearly killed him too." Seren's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily on the nearest chair. "That's why he keeps everyone at a distance," she said slowly. "Why he doesn't let anyone close. Because if he loves them, he suffers for them." Helga nodded. "Every heartbreak, every headache, every moment of grief, it all transfers to him." "And there's no cure?" Helga shook her head. "Not that anyone's ever found." Seren thought of Caleb standing in the snowstorm, steam rising from his skin. She thought of his rigid control, his frozen demeanor, his determination to feel nothing. He wasn't cold because he was cruel. He was cold because warmth would destroy him. That night, when Caleb appeared at her door, Seren did something different. Instead of waiting for him to blindfold himself, she crossed to him. He stood frozen in the doorway, surprised by her approach. "Seren?" His voice was uncertain. She rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his jaw, then his cheek, then the corner of his mouth. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Thanking you." "For what?" "For being kind when you didn't have to be." She pulled back, studying his face in the candlelight. "For defending me in the council chamber. For honoring my secrets without asking why. For—" she swallowed. "For every night you've come to me." The ice in his eyes began to crack. "You shouldn't thank me. This is contractual." "We agreed." "I know what we agreed." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "But you could have been cruel within those terms. You chose not to be." Caleb looked at their joined hands. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You make it very difficult to maintain distance. Maybe distance isn't what you need." His eyes snapped to hers. "You don't know what I need." "Then tell me." The silence between them was charged, electric. She could feel his pulse racing beneath her fingers, could see the conflict playing across his features. "I can't," he finally said. "If I tell you, if you understand." "I already know." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "About the curse. About what happens when you love someone." Caleb's face went pale. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I understand now. Why you're always in pain. Why you push everyone away." She squeezed his hand. "You're not cold, Caleb. You're protecting everyone from the cost of your warmth." For a moment he simply stared at her. Then something crumbled. His forehead dropped to hers. His breathing went ragged. And his hands, those burning, desperate hands, gripped her shoulders like she was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "You shouldn't understand," he said brokenly. "You shouldn't see me like this." "But I do." "It doesn't change anything. I still can't. We can't." Seren pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm not asking for your love. I'm not asking you to suffer for me. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't feel anything at all." Hope and fear warred in his gaze. He kissed her. Not the controlled, careful kisses from their previous encounters. This was desperate, hungry, a man drowning and finding air. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she felt the heat of him surge like a wave. They didn't make it to the bed. They barely made it past the door. Afterward, lying on the floor before the fireplace, their bodies still tangled together, Caleb spoke. "I've never told anyone about the curse," he said quietly. "The council knows. Helga knows. But I've never spoken of it to anyone." "Why not?" "Because speaking it makes it real." He turned his head to look at her, and his eyes were no longer frozen. They were vulnerable, exposed. "And I've spent my entire life trying to pretend it isn't." Seren traced a finger along his jaw. "Is that why you chose me? At the river? Because you thought you'd never love someone you couldn't see?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Yes." The word should have hurt. Instead, it made sense. A king cursed to suffer for love, choosing a hidden woman he thought he'd never truly know. "And now?" she asked. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Now I don't know what to do. Because I'm starting to know you, Seren. Despite everything. And that terrifies me." She should have pulled away. Should have reinforced the distance between them. If he loved her, he would suffer for her. If he loved her too much, it might kill him. But instead, she kissed him again, softer this time. "Then we'll be terrified together," she said. The pattern continued. He came earlier each evening now. Sometimes he arrived before dinner, eating with her in her chambers before taking her to bed. Other times they simply talked about the kingdom, about their pasts, about everything and nothing. The mate bond was forming, growing stronger with each night they spent together. Seren could feel it. She craved him when he was away, and he seemed to crave her just as intensely. It was during one of these quiet evenings, 3 months into their strange and tender arrangement, that Seren realized her bleeding hadn't come. She waited another week to be sure, then another. By the time a month had passed without symptoms, she knew. She was pregnant. The healer confirmed it, her weathered face breaking into a smile. 3 months along, Your Majesty. A strong heartbeat. The child grows well. You should tell the king. Seren waited until evening, when Calum appeared at her door as he did most nights now. They no longer pretended it was duty. He came because he wanted to, and she welcomed him because she wanted him there. But tonight, instead of reaching for him, she took his hands and guided them to her stomach. "What is it?" he asked, confused. "Feel." His hands pressed against her belly, still flat, but not for long, and then his eyes went wide. "You're pregnant." Her eyes burned and overflowed. "We're having a child." For a moment, Calum stood perfectly still. Then his face transformed. Joy, pure, unguarded joy, broke across his features like sunrise over snow. "A child," he breathed. "Our child." He pulled her into his arms, laughing against her hair, his hands shaking as they cradled her. "I didn't think... I never expected..." But Seren couldn't share his joy, because she knew what would come next. He had what he needed now, an heir. The contract was fulfilled. Their arrangement had served its purpose. He would stop coming. The thought shattered something inside her. Because somewhere in the past months, between the darkness and the heat and the slow unraveling of his walls, she had fallen in love with him. Hopelessly, helplessly in love. And now, she would lose him. "Calum," she whispered, her voice breaking. He pulled back, seeing her tears. His joy faltered. "What's wrong? Is something wrong with the baby?" "No, the baby's fine." She forced the words out. "But you said, when I gave you an heir, you said we'd have nothing more to do with each other." Understanding dawned in his eyes, then horror. "You think I would leave you now? Isn't that the agreement?" "I don't care about the agreement." He gripped her shoulders, his gaze fierce. "I haven't cared about that damned agreement for months." "Then why?" "Because I love you." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Seren's heart soared, and then plummeted, because she knew what those words meant, what they would cost him. "No," she gasped. "You can't. The curse..." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know what it means. I've been fighting it for months. But I can't fight anymore, Seren. I love you. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you see me when I can't see myself. I love..." He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went wide. His hand flew to his chest. And then, before she could catch him, Calum collapsed to the floor. "Calum!" Seren dropped to her knees beside him, her hands finding his face. His skin was scorching, hotter than she'd ever felt it, hot enough to burn. His eyes had rolled back, his body convulsing against the stone floor. "Help!" she screamed. "Someone help me!" Guards burst through the door within seconds. They froze at the sight of their king seizing on the floor, their queen kneeling over him with tears carving paths down her cheeks. "Get the healers," Seren commanded. "Now." They ran. She stayed, cradling Calum's head in her lap, watching helplessly as his body fought against whatever was destroying it from within. "Don't do this," she whispered, stroking his burning cheek. "Don't leave me. Don't leave us." His hand found hers, grip weak but desperate. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, swimming with pain. "Can't. Stop it," he managed. "Told you. Loving you would kill me." "Then stop loving me." The words tore from her throat. "Hate me instead. Please. Whatever it takes." "Can't." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Don't want to. The healers arrived in a chaos of rushing robes and shouted orders. They lifted Caleb onto a stretcher, carried him to his chambers. Seren followed, refusing to let go of his hand, refusing to be separated from him even for a moment. But there was nothing they could do. The curse has activated, the chief healer said, her face grave. His body is trying to absorb something, some kind of pain. But there's so much of it, his heart can't keep up. Absorb what? Seren demanded. I'm not in pain. I'm fine. The healer hesitated. Your Majesty, you're carrying his child. The discomforts of pregnancy, even the small ones. Nausea, fatigue, the aches of a changing body. His curse is trying to take all of it. Every tiny suffering you experience transfers to him. Horror crashed through Seren like ice water. The pregnancy is killing him? Not the pregnancy itself. His love for you, combined with the pregnancy. The healer's voice was gentle but honest. Every moment he loves you, every moment he loves that child, he suffers for you both. And it's compounding. Building. His body can't sustain it. Seren looked at Caleb lying on the bed, his skin so hot it seemed to glow. His breathing was shallow, ragged. Frost was beginning to form on the bedposts. The air itself couldn't handle his temperature, crystallizing around him. There has to be something, she said desperately. Some cure, some reversal. The curse has stood for 12 generations. If there was a cure, someone would have found it. Then I'll make him stop loving me. The healer blinked. Your Majesty? Serene's hands went to her collar. Her fingers found the clasps, the buttons, the careful architecture that had kept her secret hidden for months. If he sees what I really am, she said, her voice shaking, he'll hate me, and maybe that hatred will be enough to save him. Seren, don't. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. He'd heard. Even in his agony, he'd heard. But she didn't stop. She tore open the back of her dress, turning so the healers, so Caleb, could finally see what she'd spent her entire life concealing. The moon mark blazed silver against her shoulder blade, bright as actual moonlight, pulsing with power she'd never understood. Gasps filled the room. One of the younger healers stumbled backward, making a warning sign. A seer, someone breathed. She's a seer. Seren turned to face Caleb, letting him see the mark, letting him see her shame. This is what I am, she said, tears sliding down her face. The bloodline that curses any alpha who claims it. I knew what I was when I married you. I knew I was condemning you to death. And I did it anyway, because I was too much of a coward to refuse. She stepped closer to the bed, forcing herself to meet his fever-bright eyes. I'm a curse, Caleb. I've been a curse since the day I was born. My father knew it. My sister knew it. Everyone who's ever looked at this mark knew it. Her voice broke. So hate me, please. Hate me for lying to you, for hiding this, for letting you love something so monstrous. Hate me enough that the love dies, and maybe, you'll survive. Silence fell over the room. The healers held their breath. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to still. Caleb lifted one trembling hand toward her face. Come here, he whispered. Did you hear what I said? I heard. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away the wetness. Now come here. Seren knelt beside the bed, and his burning palm cupped her jaw. You showed me your deepest shame, he said softly, hoping it would make me hate you enough to live. Yes. You were willing to let me see the thing that terrifies you most, the thing you've hidden from everyone, just to save my life. Yes. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And despite the agony clearly racking his body, despite the curse consuming him from inside, he smiled. How could I hate you for that? He breathed. How could I do anything but love you more? No. Seren's protest died in her throat as Caleb's eyes fluttered closed, his hand falling from her face. Your Majesty. The chief healer rushed forward, pressing fingers to his throat. He's still alive, but barely. The confession of deeper love, it accelerated the curse. His heart is failing. Seren felt like she was drowning again, like the river was closing over her head, and this time there would be no hands to pull her out. There has to be something, she whispered. Someone who knows more about this curse, about my bloodline, about any of this. The chief healer hesitated. There is one possibility. The seer marks were thought to be extinct. But if your bloodline survived, others might have too. There's an old woman in the eastern reaches, a hermit. They say she knows more about the ancient magics than anyone living. Send for her. It would take days. The king might not have days. Seren looked at Kalim's still form, at the frost creeping across the bedposts, at the man she loved dying because he'd made the mistake of loving her back. Then I'll go to her myself. The hermit's cottage crouched at the edge of a frozen lake, so covered in snow it was nearly invisible. Seren had ridden through the night, pushing her horse to its limits, ignoring the protests of the guards who'd insisted on accompanying her. She'd left them at the forest's edge, continuing alone on foot through drifts that reached her thighs. The moon mark had burned the entire journey, not painfully, urgently, as if it knew something was coming. She knocked on the cottage door. It opened before her fist could fall a second time, revealing a woman so old she seemed carved from the same ancient wood as her home. White hair fell past her waist. Eyes the color of winter ice studied Seren with unsettling intensity. I wondered when you'd come, the old woman said. I've been watching you since the river. Seren's breath caught. You know who I am? I know what you are. The hermit stepped aside, gesturing her in. Seer blood, moon-marked, the last of a line everyone thought they'd destroyed. A thin smile. Everyone except me? The cottage interior was cluttered with herbs, books, and strange instruments Seren couldn't identify. A fire crackled in a small hearth, and something that smelled like tea steamed in a pot above it. The Alpha King is dying, Seren said, too desperate for pleasantries. His curse. I know his curse. The hermit settled into a chair by the fire, gesturing for Seren to take the other. The Valdris line has carried it for generations. They absorb the pain of those they love. It was meant to make them better rulers, leaders who literally felt their people suffering. But it's killing him. Because he loves too deeply. Specifically, he loves you. The hermit's ice-colored eyes fixed on Seren. And you're pregnant with his child. Double the love, double the suffering. His body can't sustain it. How do I stop it? You can't stop love, child. Not his. Not yours. The hermit leaned forward. But you can redirect the curse's energy. Transform it into something else. How? By understanding what you actually are? The hermit reached out, her gnarled fingers finding Seren's shoulder, pressing against the moon mark through her cloak. This mark isn't a curse, child. It never was. That was a lie your ancestors told to protect themselves. Serene's mind reeled. But the stories. Seers curse any alpha who claims them. Seers don't curse alphas. Seers heal them. The hermit's voice was fierce. Your bloodline evolved alongside the Valdris line. You were meant to be their partners, their balance. Where they absorb pain, you transmute it. Where they suffer, you soothe. The moon mark is a gift, not a curse, the ability to take darkness and turn it into light. Then why did everyone fear us? Because fear is easier than understanding. Centuries ago, a seer rejected a Valdris king. He couldn't accept that rejection, so he started a rumor that her bloodline was cursed, that any alpha who claimed a seer would die. The hermit's smile was bitter. Within a generation, seers were being hunted. Within 3, they were thought extinct. All because one powerful man couldn't handle being told no. Seren sat in stunned silence, trying to process centuries of lies crumbling around her. If I can heal him, she finally said, how do I do it? You must claim him fully, not just as a wife, but as a seer claims her alpha, body, mind, and soul. You must let the moon mark connect to his curse and transmute his suffering into something bearable. The hermit's eyes bored into hers. But there's a cost. You'll feel everything he's ever absorbed, every pain, every grief, every moment of agony from his entire life. It might break you. Seren thought of Kalum standing in the snowstorm, steam rising from his skin. She thought of the scars across his back, the shadows under his eyes, the mother he'd loved who died in torment that transferred to him. I don't care, she said. Tell me how. Seren rode back through the dawn, the hermit's instructions burning in her mind. But as she approached Valdris Keep, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Horses in the courtyard bearing a familiar crest. House Varen. Her family was here. She pushed through the castle doors, guards parting before her, and found them in the great hall. Her father, Lord Eldrick, standing by the fire as if he owned the place, and beside him, dressed in silk and smiling like a cat with cream, stood Lysara. Ah, there she is. Aldrich's voice dripped with false warmth. My dear daughter, we heard about the king's illness and came to offer our support. Seren's hands clenched at her sides. You came to see if he was dying, to see if you could claim something from his corpse. Such hostility. Lysara clicked her tongue. Is that any way to greet your family? You threw me into a river. You tried to murder me over Lord Brennan, a man I never wanted, a man who showed me a single moment of kindness that you couldn't tolerate. I have no idea what you're talking about. Lysara's smile didn't waver. You must have hit your head when you fell. Rage boiled up in Serene's chest, and with it, the moon mark flared. Silver light pulsed beneath her clothes, visible even through the fabric. Both Aldrich and Lysara stumbled backward. What is that? Aldrich demanded. You know exactly what it is. Seren advanced on them. You've known my whole life. That's why you kept me hidden, why you treated me like a curse, because you knew what I was, and you were afraid of what I might become. Seren, did you know the truth about Seer's father? Did you know we're not cursed at all? She watched his face pale. Yes, you knew. And you kept me weak, kept me hidden, kept me believing I was monstrous because the alternative terrified you. Lysara recovered faster than their father. It doesn't matter what you think you are, she said, stepping forward. The king is dying. Once he's dead, this alliance dies with him. You'll have nothing. Be nothing. Just like you always were. The king isn't going to die. You can't possibly save him. The Valdris curse has no cure. It does. Seren let the moonmark's light grow brighter, filling the hall with silver radiance. Me. And then, because she'd spent 19 years being silenced by these people, she did something she'd never done before. She told them the truth. You threw me into that river to die, Lysara. You tried to murder me over a man I never wanted. And father, you let her. You would have sold me into slavery with a smile. She turned to the guards who had gathered at the commotion, to the servants watching from doorways, to every witness present. Lord Aldrich Varen knew his daughter had seer blood. He knew it wasn't a curse, but a gift, one that threatened his control over his household. So he buried the truth, hid me away, and when my sister tried to kill me, he did nothing. Her voice rang through the hall. I want them arrested, both of them, for attempted murder and conspiracy against the crown. Aldrich sputtered. You can't. This is absurd. You have no proof. The Alpha King saw everything. Seren's voice was ice. He watched from the ridge as Lysara pushed me into the river. He knows exactly what you both did. The color drained from Lysara's face. He saw? Every moment. Seren nodded to the guards. Take them to the dungeons. They'll answer for their crimes when the king recovers. If the king recovers, Aldrich spat as guards grabbed his arms. You're deluding yourself, girl. That curse has killed better men than him. Seren stepped close enough to look her father in the eye. Watch me prove you wrong. Calem's condition had worsened while she was gone. The frost had spread from the bedposts to the walls, ice crystallizing across every surface as his body temperature surged beyond anything natural. His breathing was barely perceptible. His heartbeat, according to the healers, was slowing with every passing hour. Everyone out, Seren commanded. Your Majesty, now. The healers fled. The guards withdrew. Even Helga, lingering in the doorway with worried eyes, finally stepped back and closed the door behind her. Seren was alone with her dying husband. She climbed onto the bed beside him, ignoring the searing heat radiating from his skin. She pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heart flutter weakly beneath her fingers. I know you can hear me, she whispered. You've always heard me, even when I didn't speak. No response, but she felt his heart skip. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Awareness. The hermit told me what I am, what we're supposed to be to each other. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead to his. I'm not a curse, Calem. I'm a cure. Your cure. I was always meant to find you. Her hand found his, lacing their fingers together. I'm going to claim you now, not with words, with everything I am. And when I do, I'll take your pain. All of it. Every moment of suffering you've ever absorbed. Every agony you've carried alone. It's going to flow into me. His eyes fluttered open, fever bright. Afraid. Don't. He rasped. It'll destroy you. Maybe. She kissed his burning forehead. But you're worth the risk. She closed her eyes and let the moonmark take over. The silver light exploded from her shoulder blade, engulfing them both in radiance. She felt the connection snap into place, a bridge between her soul and his, between her gift and his curse, between everything they were and everything they could become. And then, the pain hit. It was everything the hermit had warned her about and more. 12 generations of absorbed suffering crashed through her like a tidal wave. She felt Calem's mother dying in agony, felt the grief of his father before him, felt centuries of Valdris kings carrying the weight of everyone they'd ever loved. She felt her own pregnancy discomforts magnified 1,000-fold, every ache, every nausea, every tiny suffering she'd barely noticed becoming a scream of sensation. She felt Calem's love for her, vast and terrifying and beautiful, and she felt what that love had cost him. Every night he'd held her while his body burned, every moment of joy he'd paid for in pain. Seren screamed. The sound tore from her throat, raw and primal. Her body arched off the bed. The silver light blazed brighter, brighter, consuming the frost on the walls, the ice on the windows, transforming everything it touched. And then, just as she felt herself breaking, the pain changed. It didn't disappear. It transmuted. The hermit's words echoed in her mind. You transmute suffering. You turn darkness into light. Seren stopped fighting. She let the pain flow through her, not resisting but accepting, not absorbing but transforming. She took the grief and made it gratitude. She took the agony and made it strength. She took centuries of suffering and forged them into something new. Love. Pure, undiluted love. Not the painful kind that burned and consumed, but the healing kind that warmed and sustained. She pushed that love back through the connection, into Calem's curse, into his very bones, and she felt the curse shatter. When Seren opened her eyes, the room was warm, not scorching, not frozen, simply warm, the way a room should be when a fire burned in the hearth, and two people lay tangled together on a bed. Seren? Kalem's voice was different, stronger, clear. She looked at him and gasped. The fever flush was gone. The shadows under his eyes had faded. His skin was no longer burning hot, but simply warm. Human warm. Wolf warm. The natural heat of an alpha rather than the curse-driven inferno he'd been trapped in. It worked, she breathed. He sat up slowly, touching his own chest as if he couldn't believe it. The pain is gone. For the first time in my life, I can't feel it anymore. The curse? Broken. His voice cracked on the word. How? How did you? Moon-marked seers were never meant to curse alphas, Seren said, exhaustion making her voice soft. We were meant to save them, to balance their power with ours, to transform their suffering into something bearable. Kalem stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then his hands cupped her face, and he kissed her. Not desperately, not fearfully, but with the quiet certainty of a man who finally understood what he had. I love you, he said against her lips, and for the first time, those words don't hurt. I love you too. She smiled, joy spilling from her eyes, and I'm never letting you go. 6 months later. The gardens of Valdris Keep had never looked more beautiful. Spring had finally arrived, melting the eternal winter that seemed to cling to the castle. Flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds, fountains sparkled in afternoon sunlight, and on a blanket beneath a blooming cherry tree, the Alpha King lay on his back, his infant daughter sleeping on his chest. She has your eyes, Seren said, settling beside them. She has your stubbornness. Kalem's smile was warm, truly warm, the kind of warmth he'd never been able to show before. She refused to sleep until I walked her around the garden 3 times. The Princess of Valdris knows what she wants. Like her mother. Seren leaned down to kiss him, then their daughter's downy head. The moon mark on her shoulder blade pulsed gently, not with warning anymore, but with contentment, with belonging. So much had changed in 6 months. Lysara had been imprisoned for attempted murder, locked away in the deepest cells of Valdris Keep where she would spend the rest of her days contemplating her crimes. Lord Aldrich Varen had been stripped of his lands and titles, banished to a remote outpost in the frozen north, a fitting end for a man who had hidden behind cold indifference his entire life. The truth about seers had spread throughout the kingdom. Other moon-marked individuals had emerged from hiding, encouraged by their queen's example. An academy had been established to train them, to help them understand their gifts, to ensure no one else grew up believing they were cursed. And Kalem, her beautiful, once frozen husband, had become a different man. He smiled now, laughed now, walked through his castle without the constant tension of a body preparing for pain. He played with their daughter, attended council meetings without exhaustion, and held Seren through the night without his skin burning her. He was free. They both were. I've been thinking, Kalem said, his finger gently stroking their daughter's tiny hand. About what you did for me. What you risked. I'd do it again. I know. That's what terrifies me. He turned his head to meet her eyes. You took centuries of suffering into yourself just to save me. You could have died. But I didn't. No, because you're stronger than anyone I've ever known. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. When I pulled you from that river, I thought I was choosing a convenient wife. Someone I'd never love, someone who would keep me safe from my own curse. And instead, I found my salvation. His gray eyes, still winter storm gray but warm now, alive now, held hers with absolute certainty. You showed me that strength isn't about never feeling pain. It's about facing it anyway, about loving anyway, about choosing connection over isolation, even when isolation feels safer. Seren squeezed his hand. We saved each other. Kalem, I was drowning when you found me, not just in that river, but in my entire life. You gave me purpose. You gave me worth. You gave me a family that actually loves me. I gave you a throne and a crown and endless council meetings. Yes, she smiled, and I've never been happier. Their daughter stirred, making a small sound of contentment before settling deeper into her father's chest. The cherry blossoms drifted down around them like snow, but warmer, softer. There's been another petition from Lysara's cell, Caleb said quietly. Seren stiffened. Another one? Asking for forgiveness, begging for you to visit. For a long moment, Seren said nothing. The scars of Lysara's betrayal ran deep, deeper than the river that had nearly claimed her life. But she thought of the moon mark on her shoulder, of her gift for transmuting darkness into light. Maybe someday, she finally said. Not today, but maybe. Caleb nodded, understanding. He didn't push. He never pushed. Whatever you decide, he said, I'll support you. I know. She lay down beside him, their daughter cocooned between them, the spring sun warming their faces. The weight of the past, the river, the curse, the centuries of lies, seemed very far away. They had both entered this marriage expecting nothing. A cold contract, a loveless arrangement, a king who couldn't afford to feel and a woman who believed she'd curse anyone who loved her. Instead, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd broken every curse, shattered every lie, and built something no one had thought possible. A family, a kingdom, a love that didn't destroy, but healed. I love you, Seren whispered. Caleb's arm came around her, pulling her closer. I love you too. Always. Above them, the cherry blossoms fell like promises, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt like something to embrace rather than endure. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and would like to support the channel for more stories like this, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. I read every single one, and they mean more than you know.